What if I told you that one of the most terrifying dystopian worlds ever created wasn't really fiction? Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale paints a chilling picture of a society where women are stripped of their rights, their names, and their very bodies. It feels like a brutal fantasy, a warning of a distant, impossible future. But here's the unsettling truth. Atwood didn't make it all up. She set one firm rule for herself while writing. She would not include any event that had not already happened somewhere in human history. Every shocking detail, every cruel practice in the Republic of Gilead has a historical precedent. Atwood simply gathered the darkest chapters of our own past and present and wove them into one terrifying tapestry. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on Gilead. We're going to uncover the real-life events, laws, and ideologies that built this dystopia. This isn't just a story about a fictional world. It's a story about our own. Chapter 1. A Theocracy is born. So how does a modern democratic society collapse into a theocratic nightmare? In the world of the novel, the birth of Gilead is swift and violent. It begins with staged terrorist attacks that kill the president and most of Congress, creating a power vacuum. A fundamentalist Christian group called the Sons of Jacob seizes control, declares martial law, and suspends the Constitution, all under the guise of restoring order. This instrumental and highly selective use of religion as a tool for social control is the bedrock of their terrifying new world. While this might seem like a far-fetched scenario, its inspirations are very real. The novel was published in 1985, just a few years after the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran. That event saw the overthrow of a monarch and the rise of a religious government that dramatically rolled back women's rights and imposed strict laws based on its interpretation of Sharia. But Atwood also looked closer to home, into the heart of American history. The novel is set in New England, the same region where 17th century Puritans established a deeply religious society governed by principles derived directly from their faith. This was America's own original theocracy. While the First Amendment later established the separation of church and state, Atwood saw the growing influence of the Christian right in 1980s American politics as a clear warning sign. She recognized how religious fervor could be weaponized to dismantle hard-won freedoms, and she channeled that fear into the creation of Gilead. Chapter 2. The Architects of Ideology. A movement like the one that created Gilead needs more than just soldiers. It needs ideologues. It needs voices that can make radical ideas seem reasonable. In the story, one of those key voices is Serena Joy. Before Gilead, she was a charismatic author and speaker who advocated for a world where women returned to their traditional domestic roles. The great and tragic irony is that she built a powerful public career for herself by arguing that women shouldn't have careers at all. Serena Joy is not just a fictional villain. She is a direct reflection of a real person, Phyllis Schlafly. Schlafly was an American right-wing activist who in the 1970s founded the conservative Eagle Forum. She became the face of the opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment, which would have guaranteed equal legal rights for all American citizens regardless of sex. A politically active mother of 6, Schlafly spent much of her life traveling the country, organizing rallies and lobbying politicians, all while preaching that a woman's true place was at home with her husband and children. She embodied the same absurd contradiction as Serena Joy, a powerful career woman urging other women to abandon their own ambitions. And in a strange, unsettling coincidence, Phyllis Schlafly's husband was also named Fred. Chapter 3. Creating the Handmaid. At the very heart of Gilead is a single horrifying obsession controlling women's bodies to solve a national fertility crisis. And the most visible, tragic symbol of this obsession is the handmaid. These fertile women, deemed immoral for past actions like having an abortion or a second marriage, are forced to bear children for the infertile elite. The regime justifies this practice with a twisted, literal reading of the Old Testament story of Rachel, who, being infertile, told her husband Jacob to conceive a child with her servant Bilhah. The quote from Genesis is used in Gilead's ceremonies. "Behold my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her." But the inspiration for the handmaids extends far beyond scripture. Consider the Magdalen laundries, which operated in Ireland until as recently as 1996. Run by Catholic orders, these institutions became grim prisons for so-called fallen women. Unmarried pregnant women were sent there, often against their will, to avoid scandal and atone for their sins through hard labor, forced silence, and harsh punishment. Many never left. Their children were almost always taken from them, given away, or sold for adoption. Then there was the Nazi Lebensborn program, a state-sponsored initiative aimed at increasing the numbers of the so-called Aryan race. The program supported the reproduction of people with racially suitable looks, establishing what were essentially breeding centers where German soldiers would pregnate racially pure women. They also systematically kidnapped children with Aryan features from occupied territories, giving them to German families to raise. Even the term handmaid itself is borrowed from a real American cult called the People of Hope. Founded in the 1970s, this group was cut off from the outside world, arranged marriages, and relegated women to subordinate roles. The women in this community were called handmaidens of God, and their role as submissive wives who policed each other became the model for Gilead's wives. Chapter 4: The War on Women's Bodies. The idea that the state can force childbirth for its own ends is known as coercive pronatalism, and it has a terrifyingly recent history. In the 1960s, Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu became obsessed with boosting his country's population. He believed rapid growth would bring prosperity. His solution was Decree 770, which banned abortion and contraception for almost all women. What followed was a nightmare. The state intruded into the most private aspects of life. Women were subjected to mandatory gynecological checkups at their workplaces, monitored by what became known as the menstrual police, to ensure no pregnancy went unregistered. A celibacy tax was imposed on people who didn't have children. The result was a national catastrophe. Hospitals overflowed. Illegal abortions led to the deaths of thousands of women, and hundreds of thousands of unwanted children whose parents couldn't afford to support them were abandoned. They ended up in horrifically overcrowded and abusive state orphanages, deprived of care and any chance for a healthy development. This brutal control over reproduction extends to other practices in Gilead. Emily, a handmaid who was a university professor before the takeover, is punished for having a relationship with a woman. Her punishment is a clitorectomy, a form of female genital mutilation. The aunt who oversees the procedure tells her, "You won't want what you cannot have." This horrifying practice is not a fiction. The World Health Organization estimates that more than 200 million girls and women alive today have been subjected to this procedure, which is still practiced in parts of Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Chapter 5: The Mechanics of Total Control. A state like Gilead doesn't just happen overnight. It is built on the slow, methodical dismantling of rights we take for granted. One of the first and shocking steps in Gilead's rise is when all women's bank accounts are frozen and transferred to their male relatives. Simultaneously, they are all fired from their jobs. In an instant, they are rendered completely economically dependent. This isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. For centuries in Western societies, women had virtually no property or economic rights once married. Their legal and financial existence was completely subsumed by their husbands' that. Education is another target. In Gilead, it is illegal to teach women to read or write. For most of human history, this was the standard. Higher education was almost exclusively the domain of men. Women who wished to pursue science or academia, like Marie Curie, often had to leave their home countries to find one of the very few universities that would even admit them. And to enforce these new laws, Gilead relies on tools of public terror. Public executions on the wall are meant to intimidate and ensure conformity. This is a practice as old as civilization, but Atwood was particularly inspired by the 17th century witch trials. In fact, she dedicated the novel to one of her own ancestors, Mary Webster.
In the 1680s, Webster was accused of witchcraft in Massachusetts. Though a court acquitted her, her neighbors took matters into their own hands. They dragged her from her home and hanged her from a tree. Miraculously, she survived. Her story is a chilling reminder of how easily mob justice and religious paranoia can overpower the law. For those who aren't executed, there are the colonies, radioactive wastelands where unwomen are sent to work until they die. This is a direct echo of the Soviet gulags, where political prisoners were sent to brutal labor camps. Specifically, Atwood drew from accounts of prisoners forced to mine uranium in the 1940s and 50s with no protection, building the Soviet atomic bomb with their very lives. Their average survival time was just a couple of years. Chapter 6. Erasing Identity. Once you control a person's body, their money, and their mind, the final step is to erase their identity. In Gilead, names are a tool of ownership. The servant class are all called Marthas. The handmaids are stripped of their birth names and renamed Offred, Off-Glen, Off-Warren, literally the property of their male commanders. This simple but brutal practice is meant to sever them from their previous lives and constantly remind them, and everyone else, that they are merely property. This is a classic tool of dehumanization, used most notoriously during the transatlantic slave trade. Enslaved people brought to the Americas were stripped of their African names and given common English ones, and were often referred to by the last name of their owner. It was a method of cutting them off from their past, their family, their heritage, and their culture. Even the clothes in Gilead are a weapon. The mandatory color-coded dress code isn't just about modesty. It's a tool of social control that instantly defines a person's status and function. Wives wear blue, handmaids wear red, Marthas wear green. It strips away individuality and reinforces the rigid social hierarchy. This practice is seen throughout history, from the homespun clothing of the Puritans to the habits of nuns, all designed to signify belonging and submission to a group's rules. Chapter 7. Resistance and Refuge. But where there is oppression, there is always resistance. In The Handmaid's Tale, that resistance is called Mayday, a secret network dedicated to smuggling people out of Gilead, documenting crimes, and fighting back. Mayday is inspired by real-world organizations that fought against tyranny. It has echoes of the French resistance during World War II, the Polish underground state that resisted Nazi occupation, and most pointedly, the Underground Railroad. This was the network of secret routes and safe houses used by enslaved African Americans to escape to free states and to Canada. It's no coincidence that Canada is the destination for Gilead's refugees. Atwood herself, a Canadian, portrays her home country as a safe haven. This reflects Canada's real-life history and self-image as a nation that accepts refugees, from those who escaped slavery in the 19th century to those fleeing war and persecution around the world today. Hope, the novel suggests, can be found even in the darkest of times, through courage and solidarity. Conclusion. The world of The Handmaid's Tale is a work of speculative fiction, but its power, its enduring terror, comes from the fact that it is not an invention. It is a reflection. It's a collage of real atrocities, real laws, and real ideologies that have been imposed on women and other marginalized groups throughout history and around the world. Margaret Atwood held up a mirror, forcing us to see that the foundations for Gilead are not in some distant alien world, but in our own past, and for many, in their present. The story is a warning. It shows how fragile freedom can be, how quickly rights can be stripped away, and how dangerous it is to ever believe that it can't happen here. Because as history proves, in so many ways, it already has. The story of Gilead serves as a powerful reminder that history is not something that is over. It is a living force that shapes our present, and if we're not vigilant, can become a blueprint for a terrifying future. Every cruelty in The Handmaid's Tale has a precedent, a moment when ordinary people either looked away or were powerless to stop it. What this story teaches us is the importance of memory, resistance, and bearing witness. I hope this exploration has given you a new perspective on this incredible work. If you found it valuable, we'd appreciate a like on this video, and consider subscribing for more content like this. Our world is shaped by the stories we tell, and it's crucial we understand where those stories come from. Thanks for watching.